the week again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress in the house, it's Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear, tips plus the world's best quiz. The cause PWA. We're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards to a windsurfing cat. It's your one-stop shop for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.
Welcome back for another podcast. We are pumping them out right now. If you haven't been tuning in for the Chile World Cup event, well, you've missed it. You'll have to go back and look at it. But this is a totally different one. We talked about it the other day. We are talking about fins. Yes, fins. We have, of course, Mr. Paul Van Bellen in the house, all the way from
hello, everybody.
WA, Western Australia. And we have got our injured soldier, our man down, our one-legged, tall
fin guru.
And he is going to be the man who is talking us through fin setups. Mark, are you ready to go through your fins? Do we have enough time to go through all those fins that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I just selected it's still a lot of them, but just selected my favorite ones and the ones I've been using in the past years. So, yeah, you'll have
just a slight shout out. We did get contacted by actually a few people to people that wanted to come on and talk about their fins and help with the discussion. And we will be doing that. But we thought this one, there's three of us anyway, and we're going to go through Mark's fins specifically. So we will be reaching out to those guys that contacted us, and maybe we're doing a more sort of free ride, slalom, and it can involve, all sorts of different fins. This one is specifically about wave fins. So in my head, we haven't really planned this, but in my head, we're going to be talking to Mark about his specific fin collection, which is quite extensive, and how those different fins affect boards, why you would have certain fins, and materials of certain fins, I guess, and what kind of, we'll do some basic stuff, and there's probably going to be some personal stuff from Mark. Would that sum it up, Mr. Marc Pare?
That sums it up perfectly. Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
It's just funny. There's a comment here from Rasmus who says, that's not Mark, it's someone younger. And I was just laughing because last podcast, we all had beards and now we've all shaved and none of us actually organized that. We just shaved. How weird.
He does look weird. I was saying, what's so weird with him? And I'm looking at me going, I look a bit weird. You look weird.
I know.
I have no chin anymore.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you got time on your hands, Mark. You start shaving.
Yeah.
But
I actually decided to put hands in my own matter and just shaved myself yesterday.
How many fins do you think you have, Mark?
A lot. Like actually, I don't even want to know, but I can say that I have like those big slalom fin bags. Sorry, I've got like 4 of those stacked up, and then I've got like my MFC handbag as well that it's fully stacked up, and then
literally. Give us an idea. If you had to take a guess, this is for £1 million, Marc Pare. You have to tell us how many sets of fins you have to the nearest round number. Go on. What would be your best guess? I know you're not going to be right, but best guess.
I don't know. At least 30 or 40 sets, maybe.
I just wanted to give people an idea because that is ridiculous. And we're talking quad fins, tri fins, different side bites, different rears, or they all come as sets?
Yeah, I mean, I've got everything, and sometimes I do mix and match. It's not like So, but yeah, I have like a lot that I've been stacking up throughout all my years windsurfing, and of course, I have like my full bags that I know. I have certain fins in them, but it's pretty big. And normally I travel, like I used to travel with 1 fin bag, then it grew to 2, and now suddenly I have like a foamy pad with like fins stacked in it because they don't fit in my normal bags, and I don't want to have to take another fin bag.
Okay,
I
so
probably travel like with around 12 kilos of fins at least, I guess.
so it's safe to say fins make a huge difference. Again, we've talked about this on a previous podcast, but people who didn't listen to that one, essentially, you can change a board's characteristics to a certain degree by changing the fin setup, changing the fin position. So they, like Mark's saying, how many boards do you take to an event? You go, okay, we're going to this venue, let's say. We're taking this board, this board, this board. You can't take millions of boards. You can only take a certain amount of boards, just logistically. So the best alternative, if you can't take lots of different boards, is to take a load of fins, and then you can change certain characteristics. You want to elaborate on that, Mark?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's you are right on the point. And for example, like this is like my standard rear fin for Pozo, and then just let me grab the side fin. And this is like the side fin that pairs with it. So you can see it's just a normal symmetrical fin. It's a 9 cm, this one. That's a 14 cm. When I use it in Pozo, I use it with exactly like that. But for example, as soon as I go to Salinas, somehow, in some way, I find the symmetric onshore fin too stiff and too directional. So then I move to this one, to this little one.
Okay, so there are people listening audio only, and there will be some people who haven't got a clue where Salinas or what Salinas is. Okay. We're going to have to be kind of just explain it maybe a little bit more. So
yeah. So basically, just let me elaborate a little bit more on it. Pozo, it's like we all know Pozo. It's choppy, really onshore. So you want to go fast and you want to have control. So that's the reason why I like this symmetrical, like wider base, more onshore fin, more upright, because that gives me the speed and the control, and helps me hold the line a little bit better. But then Salinas, it's a bit more sideshore. At the same time, as well, you want to be able to pivot and change direction a little faster. So if you want to, because it's more like wave riding. So if you want to go vertical, that's why then I use the asymmetrical fin. I think it's around 3 degrees, I'm guessing, and it's like a little bit flatter on the inside, and it has like a
So asymmetrical fin. Again, some people will understand this, and you'll probably think I'm trying to, be a bit stupid. But asymmetrical fin is obviously flatter on the one side and has the foil on the opposite side. A bit like, exactly like a surfboard fin. The side fins in a surfboard are asymmetrical. But use your windsurfing fins. If you get stock standard fins with your production waveboard, they will be symmetrical. And there will be a fin usually that works in a lot of different conditions. So we are talking, most of you guys out there, and me included, I don't change my fins. I actually use the standard fin. I know I can get more performance if I mess around with the fins, but I'm lazy. And sometimes I'm like, the extra little bit I'm going to get, is it worth the hassle? Is it worth the sit? And sometimes I'm thinking, no. As we're talking about Mark and we're talking about, competing and trying to find those extra bits, this is when it comes in. And also the type of person you are. I've been down that road where I'm changing all the little details and I'm loving it. Foilers, tinkling around with degrees here, degrees there to find the perfect, some people are just not like that. Some people are. So this podcast is for you nerdy, creative people, or maybe you have a board you don't like. Maybe you have a board that doesn't quite work at your local spot, or you're trying to get more out of it. Maybe the standard fins you've got with it don't work. You've maybe ground them down on the reef. You're maybe in line for a new set of fins. So these are the reasons that you might look into this. But it's interesting you say that. So to get more stability, to get sort of the Pozo stuff where it's very windy, you have a wider base and smaller top. Is that what you? Is that?
I mean, actually, when I use asymmetrical fins, I actually go down in size. So, for example, on my symmetrical standard normal fin would be a 9 cm, when I go down to an asymmetrical, now I'm using 8.5, and for example, this is like the one I use like in windier stuff, which is 8 cm, and depending on the board too, because that's another thing. Depending on which board you have, is the example. Back when I was with Fnatic, my boards were like a little more loose. So I needed a slightly bigger fin and a fin that would help me control the top turn a little more. So yeah, I can go into that now or later if you want. But working with Kai, we came up with based on one shape that I like, we came up with like a slightly different version of that one. So certain boards need certain fins as well. And I find myself, for example, my favorite thruster set of fins that I used to love on my old boards, now back on the Simmers, it's not my favorite fin anymore. So yeah, each board needs a different thing depending on the shape.
Yeah, and interesting. Sorry, Paul. I was just saying, interesting about the asymmetrical. It's the same with speed boards. The asymmetrical fin I used in Luderitz for the speed was like 19 cm. But if you're going to take a symmetrical fin, you need a much bigger fin to create the same amount of lift and hold. So that would kind of make sense because it's one side. I guess again, I'm not an aerodynamics person, but I'm guessing it creates more hold.
Yeah.
Just a disclaimer for this podcast: you're sponsored by MFC, are you, Mark? Or
well, not really at the moment, no. But
okay.
I've been getting some fins from him, and like I was getting some like before when I was with Duoton, I was getting custom fins from Kai Hoff. I know Kai was working together with MFC, So like for example, this shape, like it's something that Kai worked with Victor back a lot of years ago, and then because Kai was working with MFC as well together with Pio, then it went into production. So yeah, in a way, everything kind of links to MFC. So yeah,
it's interesting. But again, I've spoke to slalom guys before, and I've always wondered when people get a fin deal, because for me, it's the one thing that is. I'm not saying it's not expensive, because fins are bloody expensive, and we'll go on to that in a minute. But in saying that, why would you keep yourself like stuck to a certain brand if you know there's another fin that could change your whole board and change your whole setup and change your result? It doesn't make sense unless you are with the best guys and they've just covered every base. But I always think, and it's the same with foiling, and I've heard rumors about this year's foiling, which we'll go on to in another podcast, but there is a foil that's standing out at the moment. And if you're sponsored by a certain foil company, and you can't use this foil, let's say, that's killing it, you're only hindering yourself. Again, you've got to take in the money that maybe you're getting from being sponsored by them. But in terms of performance and result, really, you want to have a free reign, to pick what fin works the best or opens up your board.
Yeah.
I noticed then when you were showing your front fins and your rear fins for the quad setup, the front fin was G10, was it? And the rear 10 was composites, or?
No, they are both G10. I think that's just like a black G10. Just the
I see.
But this one is G10. I think now I saw Pio and stuff. They were making some newer carbon-based ones, but I don't think they're in production yet. So
I see. Yeah. And so, what do you think? What do you think about materials? Obviously you've got you do have composite. You've got G10. You've got K4 style. I mean, is it just a personal preference? I mean, what do you think about?
Yeah, materials? I mean, it depends. There's like a few things in this. For example, I do have some of like my favorite thruster fin. You can see it's like fully beat up already and repaired. This one was made by Mark Stone, Jager's dad. That's a polyester fin. And that, I think polyester is really special. I find like it has a very special feel, just like the way it springs back and it helps you, generate pressure and hold that line. G10, it's faster, I feel like, but it gets a bit like all or nothing. But as well, like the downside of the polyester fins is that after a while, like they go dead. And as you can see, when you hit them, they take more of a beating. And then the G10 ones, like you can bang them and they are like a bit more resistant, And and of course you have like the K4 style material. I was actually back then when I was still with, and now I'm back on Simmer, but before I left Simmer, I was using actually quite a few of the K4s too. And I liked especially the front fins because it made the board very soft and smooth. So for example, if especially with boards that grip more, I liked the feel and forgiveness that it had. But then at the same time, it didn't have like the same reactivity that a polyester fin, for example, or a G10 fin has. So yeah, it all depends. It all depends, and it all comes down to personal preference. But I did use a lot of K4s, and yeah, for certain boards, I really like the feel. Yeah, but I would say it's more grippier boards than loose boards that I like them on. Yeah.
With in your experience with production boards and the fins that come with it, how much can you potentially improve the board by experimenting with other fins? Or for the, I'm just thinking for the, your average windsurfer, your board comes with a set of fins. They're sort of maybe thinking of wanting to experiment a bit, but obviously it comes with its fins. You buy and then you're thinking is buy another set. I mean, where do you start there, do you think? I mean,
yeah, it's a good question. I feel like production boards always come with the fins that is, it's like always, it's always a set of fins that works, it's not like it's going to be absolutely poop. Although I've seen some board brands using some fins that I was like, oh my God, how can you put that in production?
I got a few stories from back in the day testing with Board Seeker where we had an evil twin starboard that came with these massive, thick, horrible twin fin things.
I remember those. I remember them.
It was, for me, I could hardly sail it. And Costa loved that board with those Maui Ultra fins with the more upright, and it loosened up the board. It made it way more lively. Anyway, again, personal preference maybe, but it was an interesting thing.
Yeah, but yeah, with the two brands I've been with the last years, normally I feel like it's a good base that the board just works with that, just because the board is tested with that. But I feel like you can change the board a lot, especially changing fins, and it all depends again on your kind of conditions and what you want to improve it in. Maybe you have a board that your production board is a little bit more curvy, and you feel like, like when I'm in onshore conditions, a bit more current, the board feels stuck. So then you need to maybe change to something a bit more upright. For example, that's like my onshore fin. It's like the same shape, but that's like kind of an upgraded one that we made with Kai. That's a little bit softer because I found it playing very good. It's a little bit thicker too, but it was not as nice for turning. So that's like kind of an upgrade. So yeah, the stiffer, more upright fin is going to help with that speed and get up and go. And then if you're like, oh, I feel like the board is like a bit too stiff and I'm struggling, especially like to get the board around in more sideshore conditions. So then you just take something like that. You can see like the base, it's skinnier as well, and the top is more swept back and skinnier. So yeah, that just gives a bit more of that looseness, and that tip helps to drive the last little bit of the turnaround with a little bit more tightness. Where
that fin there, that's like that Cowley fin, is it? Or that?
Yeah, that's a custom MFC. It's like a 14. It's a custom because it's a 14.5, but it's like the production.
So you can't buy a fin like that production? Is it too radical, or
you can? Yeah, they have it in production. And
I see. I thought you said. Oh, okay. I thought you said.
The reason this one's custom, it's because I like the 14.5 size. So it's like an in-between size, which is not in production at the moment. So it goes like from 14 to 15. So yeah, for a long time I wanted to get those ones, so I couldn't get them, but I finally got my hands on them, and they are really good.
It's interesting. That fin looks very much like the fin I didn't have many fins, but I had those very skinny MFCs, which look exactly like that, which I kept when I had a stiff board and I needed something just to loosen it up a little bit, and having those thinner based ones, the long sort of skinny ones, a bit swept back, that thing just loosened up boards. I had a custom simmer years and years and years ago, and I remember I hated it, but I put those fins in, and the whole board just transformed. I was like, wow, it's like totally different. So it's pretty mad.
And like with stiffer boards, especially like these fins made it light up, you know. But again, I had this fin which was like my favorite quad rear, and then with the older boards I had from Fanatic, they were a bit too loose.
Yeah, very loose.
So then with Kai, we worked on this one, which is basically like a bigger one, like a bigger version of this, and it has like a slightly wider tip as well. You know, a bit longer and wider tip. It's probably hard to see. But
I'll be honest, to the untrained eye, it's like, and that makes a difference. You know, like I can imagine people at home. Again, the guy's listening audio only. He's talking about a very sort of thin-based fin and quite narrow all the way through.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to look it up, you can look at it. It's an MFC KS model.
The County CRD fins, which have kind of
So basically, for me, that's my favorite template, like overall, unless it's like that on here, as I said, in Pozo. And that's just like a little thicker and wider tip because my old boards were a bit more loose. So I felt like sometimes they would, because I push a lot, like sometimes like the last little bit would kind of let go a bit too much. And that's why he made me this slightly bigger one. And then actually, this one is an interesting one. I got it from my friend. So this is my onshore one that I normally use for Pozo. And then he gave me this one. It's actually a super fin, as you can see. Yeah. And it's quite an interesting fin. It's a 14, this one. And I liked it. I got a board for Pozo last year, which had a little bit less tail rocker. And then with these fins, the turns were a little bit stiff. So it was like a little bit all or nothing. Like it was like a bit stiff and then it would just break loose. And with this one, has like a little bit more tip and a little bit more base, but the base still quite upright. So I was getting speed in a straight line, but it was more loose. So with that board specifically, that had a little bit less tail kick, I preferred it. Yeah.
Would you mind just putting those two fins on top of each other, because that way I could sort of see the difference.
Yeah. So this.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see. So it's a bit thicker there, isn't it, on the MFC one?
It has like a white base, like the onshore one, the MFC one, but then here it goes skinnier, and then it has like a little bit more tip. Because
I guess I'm a little bit confused. I mean, I know the absolute basics about fins, but I was hoping in this podcast to break down the specifics of the characteristics of a fin. You know, for example, if it's wider at the base, it does this. If it's narrow at the top, it does that. If it's small swept back, it does that. You know, because if I walk into a windsurf shop or want to buy a fin online and I'm looking at a fin, I want to somehow have some knowledge of what I'm looking at and what it can potentially do. And that's, I mean, at the moment, I really look at a fin and think more swept back, probably looser, and more upright, better for onshore. But my knowledge is fairly basic. Yeah. Is that something that you can summarize in a bit of a breakdown there? Or?
Yeah, I can try. I could maybe use my onshore fins to explain it, actually, because there's like a little bit of a progression here. Okay, so this is like my thruster fin. You can see.
So the rear fin of a 3-fin setup.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see it's like pretty wide in the base, so that a wider base, it's going to give you more power straight away. But then
sorry. When you say more power, can you just sort of maybe elaborate what you mean by that?
Yeah, more power. I mean, like when you push onto the fin, you're going to get more pushback, kind of. Okay. You know, so it's going to be easier to get planing because it's going to generate more lift.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's pretty straight up as well, like compared to a more surfy fin, and it has a wider tip. So again, like that wider tip is going to give you more power. You know, the skinnier it is, the more loose and easier it's going to be to bring it around, and the wider it is, the more power you're going to get. But at the same time, you get more direction. So that means it's going to be harder for you to tighten up that turn, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you say power, that's like the same as lift. Yeah. More lift.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like that. So then coming to this fin I really liked it for onshore, but then when I took it to sideshore conditions, I felt like it had limitations. Because as I said, it was harder for me, especially when I was carving the board, to get that freedom. Like, because when I put the board on rail, what I want to feel is like I'm pushing on the board and the fin is gripping, but it's drifting at the same time. It's not sliding. It's not like stuck to the water, but it's like a slight release, but it's still gripping, you know? So I found with this one, being so wide and upright everywhere, it was two directional, you know? So it would go from having all that power and all that stiffness to suddenly just breaking loose, which is fine for onshore when you just go and like hit it and that's it, you know? But it's harder to carve in when it's that onshore. And so this kind of fin gives you more of that straight line speed and power to get moving. So then for the sideshore stuff, we came up with this one, which is basically, you can see, it's like the same kind of base and outline. I don't know, maybe it's hard to see. So the base is like the same. It's pretty wide, so you still get that power. But then as we get to the top, it gets skinnier and it's more swept back. So basically the area we took from this side, we just put it towards the end. So what that helped, it helped loosen up the fin a bit more. So the turn, you would feel more of that drift, and it would be more of a progressive turn and grip, you know? Like, so it was drifting, but gripping at the same time. So this is what this skinnier but longer tip does. It just helps draw out the turn a bit more. So, and especially with the flex as well, you know, like you feel, because it's a little bit longer and thinner, that tip just helps you grip into the water. I don't know if I'm
no, it's all good. And so the flex, some fins very stiff at the tip, others are quite flexible.
Yeah.
Where do you what's all that about?
As I said, for turning, I like this these flexible tips. Like this one is pretty flexy. It's hard to see, but it's pretty flexible tip. And this just gives you this grip, this drifty grip, which I really like. And then this one, it's like way stiffer, and that just gives you that power. But then suddenly, you know, it will be less progressive. It will be more like all or nothing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then coming back to this, it's like the same with this one. The production MFC, super fast, very good when it's really onshore, like sealed and with current, super stiff. But then,
but that was a front fin, was it?
That was a front fin. I think we tried the same theory. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you do have front fins with a bit of flex in them, because all the front fins I've ever had have always been super stiff.
Yeah. No, I do have. I do have front fins with a bit of flex, and this one super stiff, very good for onshore, for planing, for power. But then when it gets to the turns, is, as I say, it's like there's a point where it doesn't help you with a turn. It just suddenly you push, and then there's a breaking point, and then it just goes. Yeah. Which is what I don't like. So then that's why I kind of updated and upgraded this one towards the end. And this one has slightly a little bit more flex. I had one that was even flexier than this one, but then it sucked for onshore. It was missing all that power. So I was like drifting and it was more loose. So I didn't like it that much. I liked it when it was sideshore, but I didn't like it when it was onshore. So then that's why we came with this one it's more like an in-between. It's a little bit thinner, so a little faster as well, but not as powerful as the other one. So it's like a good in-between, I would say.
And what about
No, go on, mate.
Oh, I was going to say, and what about the thickness of the fin? You know, is that what you call it? Like, what's the? Sorry, guys, because is it the chord? Is that what it's called? The thickness of the fin, or is the chord the base? Yeah, I can't. So if someone who's listening can tell us, that'd be great. But basically, the thickness of the fin how does that affect things? I mean, obviously the thinner, it's faster. Is thicker more power, more lift?
Thicker is more power, but I feel like at higher speeds, then it kind of hinders you a little bit more.
And there's obviously points where you just go too thick and then you just start adding drag, unnecessary drag. Yeah. Okay. So it's quite complex. I mean, there's a lot of elements to a fin, isn't there? I mean, and so that's, I guess, where I was hoping through this podcast to uncover it, make it a bit easy to choose. But yeah.
I think what we need to do is kind of summarize on a basic level, because there'll be different people listening to this podcast. There'll be some that will be soaking in the higher and every little detail, and there's others that just kind of want a rough base. And I mean, I know just from my experience, which is very basic, if I'm honest with you, just the difference between a stiff fin and a soft fin. You know, a soft fin, I think Mark said it then, but just to summarize, a softer fin, let's say, has got a way more progressive sort of, if we're talking about wave sailing and turning, if you're coming off the top, if that fin flexes, it doesn't just give up and slide. You know, it has this kind of, and if I relate it to an actual fin, think of a K4 fin. If you've never been on a K4 fin, my first experience, again, everything's different, but just on a basic knowledge, those softer fins seem to have a lot more sort of progressive sort of turn slide. And if you have a very stiff fin, very upright stiff fin, it sort of just goes. Like you get to a point, you're pushing, and it slides because it loses its grip. It's got no flex. So once it's gone, it just kind of slips. So you can use that knowledge, I think, to decide what you want to do on a very basic level. So, you know, like on a freestyle board, you want a very upright, stiff fin because you want it to slide when you want to slide. If you have a soft fin on a freestyle board and you're trying to do a sliding maneuver, it doesn't go straight away. It has like a lag where it sort of gives and it still holds. So you can imagine in wave sailing, it's such a nice feeling when you're pushing and it starts to drift. So it doesn't just give up and slide fast. It goes, grips, and you can kind of load up your front foot onto the rail and that back of the board sort of stays in control. Again, different styles of riders need different styles of fins and different waves. You know, maybe if you want a more freestyly fin, you want to be throwing out the tail and sliding around a bit more. Maybe that's when you go for two sort of upright twin fins, you know, stiffer twin fins. And then you can do those Costa back in the day, fucking triple tackers, you know, because he had a very upright, stiff G10 Maui Ultra fin. And that thing just, once you pushed it to a certain point, it started sliding and you could just keep pushing it. Like you could do Kiritodas spinning around. So I think just soft versus stiff, think of it a little bit like that. On a very basic level.
Actually, you just brought up a point about twin fins. Is that still, I mean, I don't seem to see many twin fins on pros. Is that whole trend out?
I mean, I think Pons, for example, still uses them. Philip slowly transitioned to thruster, but maybe he's still using them every now and again. But for me and someone that likes to push a bit more, I feel like nowadays with the boards we have, a quad is like offers a bit more of that grip and overall performance. But saying that, I think there's certain boards that they benefit from twinsers, you know, and you could make a twin fin specific shape, you know, but then it's like you need to tweak it a little bit. But as I see it now, most of the boards, they perform better as a quad, you know.
Do you think it's good that, do you think it's, obviously there's a lot of production boards over the last few years have had 5 fin boxes. Mm-hmm. Is that something, do you think it's good if people just buy a 5 fin box board as a wave board, or do you think they should just decide, are they going to use it as a quad or as a thruster and go a bit more dedicated? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, that's a good question, actually. There are certain boards that allow for room to play, that it's not that they only work with one kind of fin setup, like only a quad or only a thruster, but there are certain shapes that are very specific, for example, and then they slowly shifted to only one fin setup, because then with the other one, it's not better, because of the shape. It just happens. Certain shapes work better with certain types of fins, But for example, but for example, with the flywave that we have with Simmer, I've used it with both as a thruster and both as a quad, depending on the conditions, But for example, I had some old custom from Fanatic back then that I only liked it as a thruster, and then the production board then became only a quad because nobody was using it as a thruster because it just didn't work. It was like a stiff board that it just didn't want to turn then. And with the quad, it was just working very nicely. It just depends.
Yeah. Another area I was wanted to touch on was the positioning of the fins in the fin box, because obviously a lot of boards allow you to move the fins forward or back. And then you also have, not only can you individually move the fins, but then the fins can be moved further apart or closer together. And so again, more options there. So for somebody who hasn't played with their fins much, can you give us a basic rundown of what to look for there, or how, just the basics of the science of that, I guess?
Just before you answer, I just want to say, everyone in the comments, we're going to come to the comments after this question, just because it will be interesting to come through and see what you guys are asking. I also see Fin Foil in the comments. Again, I'm going to be in touch because we will do another fin podcast, which is probably more orientated to the slalom type, the free ride stuff as well. But anyway, we'll talk about fin position on wave boards then.
Yeah. So the main rule, I would say, let's say first we base on the center fins, which is the ones that get the most power. You move it more forward, the board is a little bit more loose. Then you move it back, you get a bit more drive, you get a bit more direction, more stability. So if you put it forward because you want the board to turn looser, you're going to get more of this looser, slidier feeling. And but then on a straight line, it's going to be a bit more twitchy. So if you bring it back, you're going to get this more direction. But then at the same time, in the turns, it's going to do the same. It's going to give it a bit more drive, and it's going to be a little bit more directional. So then moving onto the front fins, it kind of moves in relationship with the rear fins. So for example, once I find out exactly where I want my rear fins, like I find this compromise that I was talking about now.
Hang on. Let's just go through that. How do you do that in relation to your back foot, or is it?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. I do it in relation to my back foot. So normally, for example, my quads, they are like straight underneath my back foot. Sometimes a little bit more back than that, and then my thrusters, they tend to be a little bit further back than my quads, even like just ever so slightly. More or less, it falls like the trailing edge.
Where the back of the foot strap, because that's what I measure mine from. So we're looking at the back plug where you've got your foot strap. How does the fin sit back or forward of that? Do you measure off the back of the fin or the front of the fin?
I look more or less where the middle of my foot is, in a way. Okay. But then, for example, I do tend, for example, my trailing edge on the thrusters to have it falling pretty much underneath the screws. So just so you have an idea. And so moving back to the front fins, and just as a standard rule, I use between 2 to 2.5 fingers just to be standard. That's not accurate, because everyone's fingers are different, of course. But then if I talk about feel, so once I figured out exactly where I want to have my rear fins, sometimes you may feel that if your front fin is, like when you bottom turn, is too close to the other one, you are missing drive. So the rail is struggling to set into the water. So then it's when you move your front fin more forward to get that rail to set in the water and drive. If you feel that the board is starting to kind of just push into the water and you feel like you cannot get where you want, that's when you move it back, and then you get a little bit more of that tighter arc. You know, it happens the same in the bottom turn and the top turn. So that's the reason why sometimes I have my front fin slightly more forward than my top turn fin, you know, on the rail.
Yeah.
So then when I go to the transition of the top turn, I can have a tighter arc compared to the bottom turn, which I want the rail to set in the water.
Is okay. So you have your position of your fins sometimes set up asymmetrically depending on the wave riding side compared to the jumping side.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting, because I have heard, and I tried this actually in a video, maybe last year or year before, where I put a bigger fin on the one side and a smaller fin. Surprisingly, it didn't feel that bad. You know, like it wasn't like you were like, oh my God, what's going on here? I was like, actually, there is something in it to a certain degree. Obviously, flying along, maybe you're going to feel it, but it wasn't crazy. I just need to go back to the fingers thing that you were talking about, because this can be confusing. And I always remember hearing this because when I started wave sailing, people wasn't using multi-fin boards. So when twin fins came in, it was relatively easy. We just had two fins. It was kind of like single fin, but there was two of them. But then when quads came in, there was all this talk about 2 fingers or 3 fingers or 1 finger. Like, what the bloody hell sort of measurement is that? It depends how big your bloody fingers are. But the idea is between the front edge of your back fin and the trailing edge of your front fin, 2 fingers is the measurement from. Yes. So when you're measuring the board, because it's interesting, because I use this measurement a lot. Now, obviously, don't listen to Mark and go, oh, he says 2 fingers and you've got these big sausage fingers and you like 2 fingers. You know, it's all relative to your own thing, but it's a useful measurement which doesn't change unless your fingers are swollen. So it's just a good one if you're setting up your fin. And if you haven't got a ruler or the fin boxes aren't marked, 2 fingers is the gap between them. For me, 2 fingers, 2.5 fingers, depending if I want the board looser or a bit more drive, you know, a bit more directional. If I want it more directional, obviously you spread the fins out. You could, I don't go 3 fingers, but let's say you could go 3 fingers. And if you want it to have a bit more loose, a little bit more nippiness, 2 fingers. But that just sounds wrong. But trust me, it is a measurement I use, and listening to Mark. And it was all, I think it all came from a Victor video I remember I did on Windsurfing.TV or Boardseeker, that I remember anyway, because he went, oh, the 2 fingers between them. I was like, never heard that before in my life, but it's stuck, and a lot of people use it as a measurement.
But again, you know, you have to, as you said, it's not like everyone needs to use 2 fingers of separation between the front and the rear fin. You know, everyone's different, everyone has different needs, and what might work for me might not work for you. You know, so again,
we're talking. See, I'm talking about quads when I talk about that. Quad fins. What's your? Do you have a measurement? And again, I know this is different between lots of boards because there's tri-fin setups, there's thruster setups, which sometimes vary massively. Do you have a standard size for your thruster setup, which is 2 smaller fins and 1 big back fin? We're talking about, not 3 all the same size. Like
I do use like a bigger back fin and a smaller front fin for the way I like to sail, and what I like to feel as well. I feel like when I go bigger in the side fins, it goes against me. You know, I feel like it stiffens up my bottom turn and my top turn too much. So as I said, I'd like to feel that drift, and I feel like using too big of a fin, it just stiffens up that drift, you know? So then you have to push through that stiffness, and then it just breaks loose at one point, you know? So with
a bigger front fin you're talking about.
Bigger front fin, and even with the rear, it's the same, you know? For example, I don't like to go bigger than 18 cm. I would use an 18 cm in my onshore boats, like 95 liters. So like this one. Yeah. But then I go 17.5, 17 as standard, you know, on my, let's say 88 down to 82. You know,
what would you say, again, this is what I found out, but I'm just interested your perspective on this. If you ride relatively fast, you're a fast rider, do you feel you get away with smaller fins like that? That's what I've found over the years is the guys usually that ride bigger fins. Again, this is not a bad or a good thing. It's just a thing. If you ride a bit slower and a more lower pace, you can get away with bigger fins because everything's a bit more. But when you're riding fast and you're creating lift or you're creating with your speed, I find I have to ride. I feel like I ride quite fast. I feel I have to ride a bit smaller fins than some people. So again, depending who's watching this, what Mark's saying or what I'm saying is not always. You have to really go out there and try and assess your own equipment and your own feelings and your own riding style, which I know is not difficult. I know everyone wants to tune into a podcast, come away from this podcast and go, right, brilliant, where do I buy them? I'm just going to order these fins. I'm going to put 2 fingers apart and now all my problems with this board is cured. It's not as easy as that. It really is trying to just pick out these nuggets of information from all of this, apply them appropriately to your own circumstances. And it isn't an easy fix. It isn't, is it? Well, that's what I found anyway, which is why I use the standard fins.
No, I mean, and as you say, everyone's different. And this is a point I try to bring across every time. For example, when we are doing a clinic and they ask us about it, it's like, this is we are giving you the ingredients, like on what does what, but at the end of the day, everyone's different, everyone has different needs. So you need to play around with the tips that we are giving, so then you can make your own perfect recipe in a way, so
I just wanted to touch on what you said before, because regarding when you're just sailing on one tack and making the positions of the fins in the boxes asymmetrical, because I hear in WA you're always on port tack, so I'm always sailing the same tack. If I wanted to experiment with the position of the fins asymmetrically, any tips there to how asymmetric you make the fins in the boxes? Because we're talking about 2 fins, 2 fingers, 2.5 fingers distance, but when you're doing asymmetrically, what's your findings there?
My findings, I mean, it depends on the board. For example, I had one Hukipa board, the one I used for the Aloha last year. I messed around with that and I really exaggerated it. And I found out that I was using it like the bottom turn fin, because that board had a lot of curve, was like 3 fingers at least, So it was like really far apart. But when it was big, it was really helping me set that rail. But at the same time, I played around with it. With the top turn, then once I found the sweet position for the bottom turn, and then the top turn one, I found if I moved it too far forward, especially when it was getting more offshore, I was struggling then to keep a clean line and kind of turn tight when I needed to, because it wanted to draw out the turn a little bit more. So then I had to bring it back, and it was again around 2.5 fingers. So
just to clear that up, you're saying for your bottom turn in a decent wave, we're talking about who keeps a decent wave, you spread your fins out to give you more control and less nervousness in the bottom turn. And then off the top, you pulled them together to give it a little bit more of a tighter turn, just in the basics.
Exactly.
So asymmetrically, are you talking, so the rear fins, are you keeping them in the same level as well, or you're moving those also forward? Like, is one fin slightly forward of the other one?
No.
Oh, okay. So the rear, okay.
The rears, I always try to keep them the same. It simplifies it, and I find for me, I found that it works just fine by moving the front fin. But you can move both if you need to, but then you need to think that in a straight line, like it's going to be fighting one another, where if you move only the front fin, it's more minimal, And say again, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So basically, just to clarify, the rear fins you've got in the same position. The front fin on the bottom turn side, you've got that slightly forward, say 3 fingers. Mm-hmm. And then the top turn side, you might do it, say 2 fingers or something. Give or take,
Okay. Just to say it in fingers, it's like that.
Sure.
But this is talking about wave riding conditions, as Ben said.
I was about to say, you have to bear in mind he's talking about who keep a decent size wave, lots of power in the wave. You don't want it to be too nervous if it's big. If we're talking about, I know where your local spot is, Coronation Beach, you're probably not going to have that problem. You're going to want a little bit of squirt. You're going to want to have that the board to get up and maybe be a little bit nervous on the bottom turn because there's not as much power in the wave.
Exactly.
But it's an interesting concept to hear because I've talked about this, tried to, but I haven't heard anyone saying what you just said as if you use it. It's interesting.
I just cut out then, so I just missed the actual answer. But just quickly, so what you see, the bottom turn fin forward, top turn.
No, just saying for you and your local beach, which is obviously Coronation, which is a softer wave. You might not find the benefit of that, wider base on the bottom turn side, because you're not going to need that stability as much because it's almost an onshore turn as well. So you're almost on a different part of the board.
I was thinking more northwest.
Yeah,
that's what I was more interested in. Yeah.
It'd be very interesting to try it and see if you notice the difference. Well, maybe you can report back.
Yeah. No, look, it's because the problem I find with this whole fin thing is, you know what it's like. You go down, you finally get to the wave spot, it's firing, and you're just scrambling to get out there. And once you're out there, the last thing you want to do is get back to the beach and start fiddling around with fins with a screwdriver. I mean, you're just like, I'm out here now. This is good enough, blah, blah, blah. Even though by fiddling with it, it could improve it, but you're kind of happy anyway. And that's the issue with me with fins. It's just,
I tell you, you say that, which just brings me why I'm thinking about it. The Simmer boards for a while had these FCS screws. Now, some people hated it. There's good and bad things, but the good thing about having an FCS screw in your windsurfing board is you could keep an FCS key, which is like that small Allen key, in your foot strap. So you just opened up your foot strap, closed it up in, and then you could genuinely, and I did this when you talk about Nalu, that's what I was doing when I was there, because it's such a perfect wave. There's not many waves like that in the world where you have this consistency and you do a couple of waves and you can actually tell what you need to change because you get so much consistency. A lot of places around the world, there's chop, there's waves, and it's, the last thing you're thinking about is my fins right? Whereas like Nalu, for example, I was genuinely going, right, I feel like I need a bit more looseness. I feel like I need drive. And I was actually adjusting them in Nalu, which was one of the only places I've really ever done that on the water. But obviously with screwdrivers and bigger tools. And I actually was just saying to Simmer, because the new ones have got like basically a bigger star head. I was saying that they should do a Torx key, which is like a small little key, which you could keep in your foot strap. Because I think once you've got this little tool or on your harness or something, you're much more likely to give it a turn, move it, tighten it back up. If you've got to carry a screwdriver, I mean, who the hell carries a screwdriver when you're out in the water? But with these Torx keys, you don't need to get so much downward pressure because they just fit in. So you'd only need like a little. That was why I was thinking about it.
But it's worth saying, you just need to take yourself together to do it. You just say, okay, today I'm going to do this. And you say, couple runs, change it, and that's how you learn. And I learned this, back when I was doing slalom. It was the only way to know what each change was doing. Sometimes I would sail on my own, just back and forth, change the mast, back and forth, change the downhole or whatever. And it makes a huge difference. But you gotta put your mind to it, otherwise you're never going to do it.
I think what we need to do is like I said this on another podcast, but it's like golf where you go and get fitted for golf clubs. They look at your swing and they adjust it, and then you swing and then they adjust it. You need someone to be there, like a pit crew, Marc Pare with his fucking 10 fin bags all arranged on the walls in this tent, which is on the beach. And then you sail out, you ride a wave, you come in, you report back and you say, I felt this. And then you go like in the Ferrari 1 pit stop, you're like, okay, right, go back out. And then they come in, because to do it yourself, it does take a lot of, you've been working all week. You've got one day of wind. You just want to go sailing. You know, when you're a professional sailor like Mark, and back when I was doing it, you're trying to get those gains. But the one thing you do notice when you put the time in and you have the condition to do it, the benefit is massive. It really does make a huge difference, like a huge difference. And this goes with, you know, changing your sail setup, because I don't want to get too confusing here, but if your sail is set a certain way, it will affect the board in a certain way. You know, when we used to do testing with Board Seeker and stuff like this, you would take one board out and you go, oh, this board's freaking epic. And then we do sail testing as well. You take it with the Boxer, Nash Boxer, and you'd be like, well, this board's totally different now, or this sail's shit because of that board. And the board and sail and fin setup have to go together. So there are certain combinations that work absolutely amazingly well. And there's some combos, and this is in slalom as well and everything, you know, some sails lift up, some sails push down. It's the same with wave sailing, you know, and I know there's a lot of people out there. Again, I don't want to confuse people and they start doubting everything, but certain sails pull in different areas of the sail and pull up and pull down. And certain boards sit lower and certain boards lift up higher, and certain fin configurations will lift your board or drop your board. So it's like it's a minefield. When you go into it, it's scary, but don't think of that big picture. Just concentrate on certain things at a time and try and tick those boxes off. Try and feel what you're feeling when you're on the water. Am I planing early? Are people planing around me? Am I got enough? You know, those little things that you can adjust and change will make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
Should we have a look at some comments?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I did see a couple which I think were pretty cool. Let's have a look at what we got here. We got Gian saying, what if your front fins are mini Tuttle? I.e. they do not move, you know, because those mini Tuttle box are literally fixed. Can you achieve that effect with moving rears? It's interesting, actually, because that's a good question.
I think it is a good question, and I personally don't like the mini Tuttles at all, just for that reason, because they don't allow you to move the fins and personalize it a little more. So yes, you can achieve a little bit of that effect moving the rears, but again, you're going to be limited to so much that you can do, you know. So it's either going to be you're going to be able to control how loose of the rear fins is or how dry it is of the rear fins, but you won't be able to fine tune the side fins, you know, which allow you to set the rail more or less. You know, so it's going to be more how it feels under your back foot, more like that.
Okay.
But yes, you can achieve it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing with mini Tuttle, if you don't want to think about if you can move your fins, get a board with mini Tuttles in, because in theory, that brand who have put mini Tuttles in are confident that that's the most useful spot to put them and works in the most whatever, and you don't have to think about it. So it takes one thing out of your brain. If you can't move it, you can't even think about moving it. But yes, it does limit what you're allowed to do. I was trying to think of something else that might relate to that in normal life, but my brain's gone.
I'm actually laughing at this comment here from Rasmus, who says that an MFC fin bag is a windsurfer's equivalent to a woman's Gucci bag, because in the back of my van, I've actually got an MFC fin bag, and I carry it around with pride. It's funny. Yeah. Do not care about bags, but there's something about a fin bag. It's so cool. You can it's like a little toy bag, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just put it all in there. It's good.
I mean, but like I say, it changes everything. You can change everything. It would be, again, when I'm always doing these podcasts, I'm always thinking of videos that would be interesting. And it is a genuinely interesting video where we basically get someone, it's like a doctor's surgery type thing where you bring out all these fins and you do what I just told you. You know, someone just goes out and you try and match them up. Again, you do it as it is, and whatever the result is, the result. But I think it would be very interesting if you could change someone's style. Actually, a Waggy just popped up, and I always remember when he started doing K4 fins, and there was a few guys that changed their fin or did something, and they were coming into the shop and going, "Oh my God, it's just night and day difference. The board does this better, again, it's not always as easy as that, but I always remember people doing that and being genuinely shocked at the difference, because as Paul said, it's just not something people do, is it? You get to the beach, or I said, and they just put the fins in, let's go sailing,
How underrated do you think it is, Mark? Sorry, we'll get to the comments, but fins, there's a lot of emphasis on sails and boards, I guess, but we don't, fins is not really, for the average sailor, I don't know, from where I'm sitting, it's not often looked at too much. I mean, how important if all the components of the windsurfer, where would you rate the fins as importance of how much effort you should be looking into it, you think? Is it?
Depends if you like your board.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's super important, It's just so you have an idea. It's like having a Formula One car with street tires, Is it gonna go? Yes. Is it gonna? But at what? How good is it gonna be to its fullest performance? Very far, for sure.
Which is actually, it's a good point, because on a Formula One car, you could probably argue that tires are the most important thing. Really, basically, isn't it?
It's like foiling with foiling. You can have all the best gear, but if your foil isn't working, it's the only thing that's in the water. So, and that's the same with wavesailing to a certain degree. Obviously, the board has to be working to a certain degree at your spot. Because remember, the best board in the world is only the best board in the world in certain locations. Silt board compared to a Tenerife, well, not a Tenerife board, but a Pozo board compared to a something else board, you've still got to get the volumes right. You've still got to get lots of parameters. And I don't want to confuse people out there and I don't want you all thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. You still, can enjoy your sail and your sessions. This is for the people that want to get a little bit extra out. And you can get a little bit extra. And some people will get way more than they think, because I tell this to everyone. I've said this to Mark over the years. Try as many different boards and as people's equipment as you can. Otherwise, how the hell do you know what you've got is what you like? I have had my eyes opened on so many occasions back in the day when I'd borrow someone's equipment, especially when freestyle first came out, and I tried a couple of Swifties custom boards and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, it's like a different world on these things. They're literally like autopilot. And then again, wave boards, the feel of a bottom turn between different boards and different fin setups. And it's just mind-blowingly different sometimes. Obviously, if you go on the same brand and the same thing, you're going to get similar feels. But if you go on different brands, different sizes, different stuff, you might be shocked. If you've only rode one board for the last 10 years or 5 years, honestly, your eyes will go, wow. It is the ride, even just the softness of the ride against the chop, about the way it turns, about how loose it is off the top. If you're only on one board, you'll be listening to this podcast thinking, yeah. But if you've been on a few different boards and you've rode different stuff and you know what the differences are, then you can start to enjoy this type of tinkering, let's say, because you need to know what's possible to be motivated to do it. Or you can just shut up, shut your ears down, pull the board out of the van and go sailing, which is also cool. There is zero problem with that. But this is for the guys that, just kind of want to open up a few different avenues. And you really can feel the benefits. And one of the benefits is just training yourself to feel different things. I saw a comment before. What did it say? It said something like, I think it's totally misleading for mere mortal windsurfers to listen to pro windsurfers. They're different worlds with different requirements. I agree to a certain extent, but if you can train yourself and try and feel these different feelings, you can benefit a lot, whether you're a pro or, and sometimes more. Because if you're on the wrong setup, with the wrong fin setup, the wrong board, and you don't know it, you can be having some shitty sessions, which are not shit because it's still windsurfing at the end of the day, but they can be way more enjoyable. way more enjoyable if you've got the right setup. So until you know what you're feeling, it's very difficult to get the right setup.
Yeah.
Bob's asking here. I thought I'd just go. Might as well answer a lot of these comments.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he's obviously into flat water because he's asking the question: do wave fins cost as much as slalom fins? Let's say $400 to $500 US per wave set. Who wants to comment? Who wants to answer that?
You can get them for less, but they are still super expensive. But I think you can get them for less. I think it's a lot of money, but a quad fin setup, a new G10 one, probably you can get them for around 250 euros, more or less.
Is that your price or?
Huh?
Is that team price or is that the retail price though?
No, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know better, but I think it's around 250, 300 euros maybe for a.
I know they're expensive because I had a shock when I had to buy some of them.
In Australia, if I bought a MFC quad setup last year, and I think it cost me about 300, 350 Aussie, which is about 2 to 250 euros. So,
what were they made out
of? I think it was a composite, or it wasn't. Well, I guess like this the MFC Mark fins, the black ones. They're a composite or are they a painted sort of G10?
They are black G10, I think.
Oh, are they? Okay, because you just can't see any glass under there, so I wasn't sure what they're actually made of. But okay.
What would you recommend in terms of construction for fins people are buying? Because I know your average wave sailor wants G10 just because it's so hard wearing. You can knock it on the ground, you can grind it. I saw a comment earlier, maybe I'm wrong, someone asking why don't they do carbon fins? Carbon is the best material for this sort of stuff. My guess would be it's just too delicate. That I could be wrong. Is that maybe that's not the reason?
I have no clue.
It's very short, so it's less about the
quite stiff, huh? Carbon.
I don't know. Actually, I've never tried carbon fins. I would be interested to try them. Sorry, but I've never tried them, so it's hard for me to tell what they do. I've only had G10 and polyester fins, and I've tried as well like the
Jan says the black ones are not G10. I've seen some broken. They're kind of molded crap. I know the old red ones had a really bad rap.
Yeah, those ones were breaking a lot
because they weren't working well at all. But I thought the black ones they changed. Again, depends which black ones we're talking about. But
okay. What else have we got here? Sorry.
Tried the Zulu. Yeah, do we go? Let's go through the comments from. Are you gone back to the beginning, Paul?
I have, but I'll let you choose.
Tim Williams interested in flat, and we might have covered this one. Tim says interested in flex characteristics. Pros of DRL G10 I find too stiff. K4 a bit too flexy. Glass fins from Mark Stone seem just right. The problem is Mark Stone doesn't like making too many fins, so
I can vouch for the Stone fins because I've got there's a Stoney right here in the background, and I've got one or two of his boards, and they're definitely nice fins. They're sort of a nice combo of flexible and stiffness, isn't it? It's a nice characteristic of the polyester fin.
Sam says this was to an earlier question. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's all down to feel for the individual. Personally, I love the K4 Flex for purely wave riding as they just hold longer compared to the stiffer fins. K4 rules, and that's what I was saying before. If you want something to hold a more flexier fin, just get that nice feeling of hold, and you don't get any of that slide. Again, depends on your board. If your board's got loads of hold or it's super loose, it depends on what the feel you want from the board. So the main thing is to understand what these things do and then try and apply them to what you want to personally get from your equipment.
Richard H has clarified my question before regarding chord. It says chord is the distance between the leading and trailing edges and thickness is the max distance between the two surfaces.
That makes sense. Yeah, I got that wrong. My fault.
And thickness is the max distance.
Yeah, that's just the thickness of the.
Okay, I see.
Cord.
Yeah,
the
sure.
cord is what Mark was talking about. The base. That's your cord. So, like a
Mm.
thin cord on a fin makes it super loose. That's what I found. When you get that wider base or a wider cord, that makes it more stable and more sort of solid stuff to drive on. So it is worth having a few different fins in your bag, like especially if you've got some extreme fins, because you can. And again, it depends how much you use in your board. Some people have a board. You know, waveboards are really good now. They have been for a long time. So you could have a 5-year-old waveboard, which is plenty good enough. And you might just want to liven things up a bit or change it up a bit. You know, it could be the difference of that. But if you're like Mark, he needs this many fins. The reason he's got this many fins is because, let's say he's just come back to simmer. You know, the production boards are good. We're all happy. Well, we're not going to stay there like that. It's not going to be like that forever. You've got to test new boards. You've got to try new stuff. So when you get a new board, if he goes back to Ola, who shaped the board, and go, yeah, I don't like it. It's like, but it might be good with a different set of fins, or, you know, chances are a good board is a good board and you're only, you know, trimming little bits, but it can make a big difference. You can't just test a board with one set of fins. It doesn't make sense.
And again, going back to that comment that what I'm saying, it's just like for my specific needs, because and it doesn't apply to mere mortals. I don't think it's true. You know, as you said, you know, I know why it does what, and I know what I need to do to fix it. But people might just feel more comfortable or less comfortable, and they might don't know why. You know, so I think it's not true. Like you need to try the different things, and you might feel like you're riding better. You know, again, you don't know why, but changing.
I think it can make bigger differences sometimes.
Yeah. You know, and it's in these simple things and small things that you feel like the biggest differences. You know.
I mean, the thing is, and this is a classic example. You've got the wrong setup, and you're not planing early. And you're like, I'm shit, I can't get planing early. Little do you know, you could be on that board for 4 years because you don't want to spend another board. You're a bit depressing. But you get on another board, or you put some different fins in the board, and the board's planing. And it's not you. It's genuinely the board for your conditions. It doesn't work as well. And I've seen this so many times. People in Maui use a board at Hukipa and like, oh my God, this board's amazing. I'm going to buy it. So they buy it and they get back home and then they're like, fuck me, this doesn't even work. It doesn't even go. It's bogging on not bogging, but you know, there's no drive off the waves because there's not as much pressure from the wave. And you're like, if you didn't try it in Maui and you didn't know it was a good board, you'd literally put it in the bin sometimes. But you know it works in good waves, so you keep it for those good wave days. But I know so many people have done that. It just does not work at their local break. And you would think it doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work like that every time, but I've seen it happen a lot, especially with the older boards. You know, I think newer rockers and newer shapes and stuff have changed a bit, but definitely in the sort of mid 2000s era where there was like real Hukipa boards, and then they literally did not work. It was kind of mad.
There's a good comment here from Fin Foil, which is it says soft fin is like a loose leech sail opening up, less efficient but stalls more progressively. It's good to think of a fin like a sail, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, they're both wings. One's aerodynamic and the other one's hydrodynamic, I guess. But they're doing.
If people are just tuning in, I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier. We will try and do like a free ride, come slalom fin setup, and I'll try and get a couple of experts in, because I'm definitely not an expert in that field, but I think it would definitely be an interesting chat. And I think it will probably open it up to a few more people, because I know wave sailing fins sort of talk is very specific, but as we try and do on the channel here, we know there's a lot of niche markets, and I know it's not going to be thousands and thousands of people that are going to be interested in this, but even if it's just a couple of hundred, or, you know, that benefit from it, I think it's worth it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, you know. So if you do find it interesting, give us a little like. I don't know why. I've heard people say that on YouTube.
I've got a question for you, Mark. Any thoughts on toe in versus no toe in?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is what I was explaining before. Like for me to have like this toe in, it helps a lot to turn this extra little bit tighter. You know, you feel it.
Wait. Before we go anywhere, let's just explain what toe-in is and also different boards, because it is interesting. I didn't know this. So toe-in, if you can, well, you can explain it, Mark. It's easier just to show it with your hands or
show the fins. You can show your fins, yeah.
Okay, so basically, let me see if you can see it. Yeah. So basically, you have the base, no? And you can see that the leading edge is like more into the trailing edge. So you can have different degrees.
Let's just explain it basically. So basically, the idea of toe-in is your fins aren't straight. Like talking about the front fins. The back fins are usually always straight, correct me if I'm wrong, in the box. So they point straight up the board, very straight, parallel. But the front fins, as we see on surfing as well, they toe in because of the way, well, I'll let Mark explain it in a minute. And the problem we have to work out, and this isn't the most simple thing to do, some boards have got straight boxes. Okay. So then you have a fin with more toe in. Some boards, like the Simmer, actually has toe in the boxes.
Yeah.
So when you're buying fins, it's like, oh, I'll buy one with 2 degrees of toe or 1 degree of toe or 3 degrees of toe. You have to, and there's a very good chart on the K4 Fins website that you can, I think, put in the details of your board and it will tell you which fins you need because certain boards have certain toe in. I don't know if I hope that's clear. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the fins you've got there have got a certain degree of toe in. So they're not straight.
Yeah, here you can see the one on this side. This one is the straight one. It has 0 toe in. And the one on this side, this one has degrees of toe in. So you can see the front of the fin faces inward like this. And then the back part goes out like that. So that basically, it just to be simple, it tightens up your turn. Like when you push it, the board is going to connect to that turn easier. You know, it's going to have less direction and going to be able to have a tighter arc, just to make it simple. What is the problem that I find with this kind of fins? For me, for example, I got used to it, so it's not a problem. But when you're going on a straight line and you start carrying quite a bit of speed, you find like that one fin might fight one another, you know, because it's like that. Anything, it's not straight. So it's kind of fighting one another sometimes, especially not that much if you're pushing more on the rail, but if the board is more flat. That's what the problem is going to be, you know. So for example, when you're pointing downwind full speed, you know, that's when you're going to feel the problem because you're sitting more on the fins, on the board, and it just fights one another like that, you know. So basically you have less stability, but even that, like some people might say that they are slower. I have never found that they are slower. Actually, I've actually found that they are faster. And for example, I once tried one board that was slow. You know, it was a bit sticky. It was struggling to plane. I chucked these fins on, and the board was faster. I put back the normal symmetrical onshore fins, and actually the board felt like it was holding back even more. You know, so I find like they do go faster. It's just harder to control. You know, because one is going to fight the other one. You know, so for me, it's not a problem. For example, in pose, it can be a problem. So that's the reason why then I'm going to go with the one with 0 degrees. It's just symmetrical, no toe in. You know, because then you go like from upwind to suddenly flying downwind to find the wave to jump. You know, and with all that chop, sometimes it gets super hard to control. You know, and there you don't really need to turn that tight. You can extend the bottom turn and blah blah blah. You know. But I found a big difference on these fins, on the toe-in ones, asymmetrical, especially in the quads. I liked it a lot because it allowed me with certain boards to change direction in the bottom turn, more like if it would be a thruster of my back foot, you know? So thruster allows this more vertical, more pivoty bottom turn. and the quad tends to drive a little bit more. So with the asymmetrical ones, I could break the line, so I would get that drive at the beginning, and then as soon as I would step on my back foot to go, it would come up easier and with more freedom, and at the same time,
Speaking of that, have you ever experimented with cant?
I actually did have some fins with cant.
So what we're talking about when we talk about cant is now the angle of the fin. So we're talking about looking up the board, that's toe in, whereas now we're talking about if they're splayed out. Exactly. And surfboards have these kind of fins. Yes. I tried some like canted K4 fins years ago on Maui, and my God, off the bottom, the thing just went vertical. But in a straight line, it was horrendous. Yeah. But off the bottom turn, Jesus, it was like.
I did have one set. It's not my favorite one. I still have it. And what I liked about it, it was the smoothness, like the roll from one rail to another. It was crazy. It was super smooth and rolly and grippy. But I found these ones, that it's just towed in and asymmetrical. These ones were more spicy and more exciting. You got a little bit more of that crispy, drifty looseness compared to the other ones that were more rolly, rail to rail. And actually on video, my turns look better on this than on the canted ones, even though it felt like it was rolling.
Feels amazing, doesn't it? It's got like a feel.
Yeah.
And again, what you have to remember when you're windsurfing, yes, we're going off feel, but also you've got to see visually what it looks like. And it's not always based just totally off feel. Because I always remember when the stubby boards come out, actually, a lot of people were coming in thinking they were doing the best waves of their life. But actually, visually from the beach, I don't know why, it didn't look as good. And it was, I always remember it being a Hookkeeper when the very first Fanatic stubby came out. And Klaas Boggett was like, oh my God, I just did the best turns of my life. Oh my God. I was like, I didn't think it looked very good. But it was kind of funny because it felt amazing. And I don't know why that is to this day, but it's a strange thing. Fins
you sound like a winger now.
No, but it's actually funny, and then here it's a fine line then, if you are not competing.
That I was thinking, as I said it, I thought, well, actually,
it's better for you, even though it looks shittier.
Because it doesn't matter, does it? Really?
Why not? Yeah.
Well, you want to get
because sometimes
chicks on the beach, no? Well, but it's like foiling. Foiling's a great example of it. Guys that are on the foil wave riding, they come in like, oh my God, yeah, did you see that? Really? And there's no spray, there's nothing. All they get is feedback from the foil, which I know I've done it. It feels amazing. But visually,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. Like you come in and it's like, well, you look the same as all the other turns. They're getting this feedback, but when you do usually that on a windsurfing board or a surfboard, usually there's like how many foot of spray coming off the back, and you pushed water. Whereas on a foil, you're just
just the pushback that you get. I can fully relate to that when I was surfoiling. I went next to my girlfriend. I did like this roundhouse. I was like, oh, that was sick. No,
that's sick. Yeah.
I was like, okay, that did look like shit.
Yeah.
We're gonna get into the fin versus foil debate. This could get ugly, although we probably all agree. We like.
Questions? Actually, we've missed probably a lot, have we?
Well,
there we go. Danny Cornwall says this is the best podcast ever.
Oh, thank you, Dale.
Cheers, Dale.
Is it because Mark's on? We need to get more people.
We're getting nerdy. People like a bit of nerd.
Yeah, that's good. Look, the fin one was very overdue, and I think it will inspire people to try different setups a little bit.
Matteo says I always go asymmetrical.
Yeah,
Why wouldn't someone go asymmetrical? Or when was the best time? Like if someone's thinking, ooh, maybe I fancy a bit of asymmetrical, because it's not a common thing on the fin market, or correct me if I'm wrong. I know K4 have standard asymmetrical fins. I know they first started off with the ESI fin. I think that was one of the first asymmetrical fins. So they've had that for a while, but correct me if I'm wrong. Has any other brands got stock standard asymmetrical fins?
No, not that I know of.
No, I didn't think so.
I think maybe Flicka, they do sell some with their boards. I think they do sell some asymmetrical fins. Maybe that there might be other brands or smaller brands that they have asymmetrical, but that I know of, it's only K4.
And when we're talking asymmetrical, are we talking asymmetrical with the quad or asymmetrical with the thruster, or both?
Both. Yeah. Okay. I have them. I can show you. This is my thruster wave riding asymmetrical. This I would use on Tenerife, or even in Silt. I was using that one when it was more sideshore.
And what? Give me some sizes. What size are you using your thrusters? What size boards? What we think?
With the thruster, I go 10 cm when it's asymmetrical with towing on the sides, and I go 17 or 17.5 as standard on the rears. And then I do have a one like this one with the same outline, but symmetrical with no towing, and that one is 10.5. So as we were speaking about, when it's asymmetrical, I go down like half a cm or 1 cm, just because the asymmetrical just gives you that extra bit of lift. And then with the quads, I have 8 cm as my small asymmetrical one, and 8.5 as my standard one. So let's say 83, 85 liters up to 88, 93 liters, I use 8.5. I don't go bigger than 8.5. I had some 9s in the past, but I always hated them. I don't know why. Like it just felt too sticky, And with 8.5, you get that extra bit of freedom.
I'm just trying to bring this back to your normal guy who's listening to this. What can he walk away with? What's his takeaway? Because it is very confusing. I'm looking at how many fins you've got. Because the likelihood of someone walking away from this podcast, I think the best case scenario is they might buy a new set of fins. How do they decide what fins to buy? Because not everyone has the luxury to try all these fins and work out what their board needs. Is there like a standard, like how would you, I'm thinking out loud here, is like, how would you go about telling someone what they should get? Because let's say they bought a board, it's got the standard fins in it.
Yeah.
So I would say, again, I'm thinking out loud how I would approach this. So firstly, we need to know what they're feeling. Are they feeling fast? Are they feeling slow? Are they early planing? Are they turning as they want to turn? So first things first, I think you should address the positioning of fins. That's the first port of call, is the finger thing. Working out, can you change the board by moving the fins around, trying it?
Which you can a lot.
Yes. So, bearing in mind, let's say we've done that and you still want something more. What are the options? The options are asymmetric front fins.
Yeah. Well, I would say here, where are you going to use the fins? Like, where are you going to sail?
Okay, I'm going to answer these questions. I'm going to use them in a down the line spot.
Okay. So for a down the line spot, I would say going first with the rears. You want something like a little bit skinnier and more swept back.
Okay.
100%. Because
we're going to keep it as simple as we can. Okay.
I would some template like that. K4, they have their own take on it, the Scorcher or whatever they call it in simulator. I don't know. And NFC, they have this one, this shape, which is the KS model. Yeah. So first of all, for down the line, I would go shape like that, 100%. And then once you are into it, you say it's mainly for down the line, and I already have like some kind of standard fins that look more or less like that. Let's say a bit more swept back, not as straight as this. You see the difference?
Yeah.
And then I would say go asymmetrical, if you already have some set of front fins. Because I feel like that's where the biggest benefit and the difference
can be made.
Yeah.
And if they're going asymmetric in the front fins, let's say they've got 9s, quad fin 9s in the front, they want to go smaller than 9, or 9 5s or 10s. If it's asymmetrical, they have to go smaller.
Yeah. Then I would say go 8.5. For example, if you have 9s, just to not be such a big step, then you go 8.5. If you are using 10, then you can maybe go 9.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't go
in a tri-fin setup. Let's say they've got, what's the normal front fin? 10 5, 11 10s.
Yeah. For a standard 85, 11, then I would go 10 or 10.5.
In asymmetrical.
With the thruster, asymmetrical. With the thruster, you have a bit more base straight away. Yeah. So I feel like you make up for it.
Okay.
So I would go around 10, 10.5.
Let's say they want to sail, they're sailing mostly in onshore, not super big waves.
Yeah.
Cross onshore. It's a typical Euro.
Yeah. So let's say.
Not powerful waves, let's say.
Yeah. So if you're sailing more in onshore, and most production boards, they don't come with very straight fins. They are more like kind of like that, for example. It's more like standard, like a little bit more upright, but with a tip. Yeah. Then I would say if you feel like your board is not fast enough and you want it to get planing earlier, then I would go with something like that. A little bit more upright, a little bit stiffer as well, and yeah, you can go up in size a tiny little bit too.
Okay.
So you get a bit more of that power, especially if you are a bigger guy. And then for the front fins, the same, something that pairs up with it, something a little bit more upright, like that, a little bit thicker, and that's going to help you get that get up and go pressure. Let's call it pressure, not speed. And get early planing and be able to push upwind a bit more, because let's say more fins with like a narrower core up here and a longer tip, they get more twitchy, especially because the longer tips get a little bit more flexy, so then it's hard to go upwind. So that's the reason why then you want something with a little bit more base, a bit more upright, to get that fin depth and speed.
Okay, interesting.
Just have a question just to confuse everybody further, but obviously we're talking about the size of the fins in centimeters, but when I bought the MFC fins, on the fins they measure them in area. Yeah. So what do you? And I found it a little bit tricky because in the shop I was like, there was a choice between, I think it was 250 or 300, and I'm there going, oh God, I don't even know what's going on there, and blah blah blah. Yeah. So
I feel you, because I had that specific set of fin that was measured like that, and I actually had no freaking clue like what size it was, so I actually had to measure it.
So that's the area ones, the 300s or the 350s or the
yeah. Those ones that they are like upright, but they have this weird tip like this. Yeah. But again, it's not my favorite kind of fin. Like if you go for an upright fin, this is my favorite one.
Yeah. But in a way, if you think about it, maybe I'm wrong, but the area of the fin is probably more accurate and important information than just the actual length of the fin, isn't it? Because I mean, you could have, a 15 centimeter fin, but if the base is a lot wider or thinner than the other, that's going to change the whole characteristics of the fin. I would have thought the area is actually the more important aspect.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good point. Yeah. And going back to it, we had to experiment with this one in specific because I was missing that pressure that I was talking about. And for example, 14 is kind of on the small size for me. So I only use it on my smaller boards. So I did have a 14.5 of this one. It was one older prototype that the guy made back then. And I didn't like it, at all. It was like too much area. So it's actually a very good question. It was too wide. So actually, I found with these ones, it's better. Like for me, it's faster and more playful on the smaller scale.
Okay.
And this is a 14, which is same size in cm.
Yeah.
But this is way more loose. So with this one, I could actually go 14.5. So that's the reason why this 14 I can only use it on my very small board. So.
Yeah, Finfoil has made a good comment here. It says both depth and area matter, but depth is the first to consider. So thank you for that.
Question here, Robert. Well, not a question, just a comment. Says very interesting. I recently bought a pyramid and tried the supplied MFC fins. The board felt dead, almost like it was dragging weed on the fin. I had a look at the thrusters. They were almost 10 mil thick and super stiff. I sanded them down to 5 mil, making them asymmetrical. The performance difference was remarkable. The board was faster to plane, faster to turn, faster and turned better with no real issues. Just don't overdo it, as you could lose strength. Begs the question why MFC still supply these on the pyramid. Interesting. I mean, again, like personal experience, like doing stuff like having the confidence to do it. Obviously, you must know a little bit or something, but it is true when you know what the board should feel like and you feel it dragging. And this is what we're saying. This is the thing you really need to understand is the feel that you should be expecting. Because if you don't know the feel, you could be on a dog, and it could be the fins, it could be the board, could be lots of different things. But you can get out of that if you try and understand it. And you'll only get that from trying different boards and understanding what different feels are out there. So like I really suggest ask your mates, try each other's boards. I know that may sound a bit, people don't like people trying other people's boards. That's fine. But most of us windsurfers, as long as there's no rocks around and there's loads of crazy stuff and the guy's not going to go out and do some massive flat forwards, as I have lent someone a board like that and they did that once.
I've got a comment that we can probably, a lot of us can relate to. But if I went down to my local beach here and actually looked at everyone's fins, there's a high chance that many of the wave fins have got little chips in them. They're damaged. They're not perfectly new and beautifully sanded. How important is it to keep fins chip free for the average sailor?
I've got a story.
Very good. Me too. Just from the day I heard myself, actually, I banged the reef at Hokipa just because it was low tide and going out, the shore break, the wave sucked out, and then the reef went up like that. So I hit the fin, then I chipped it, and then you could feel the turbulence under the fin. It didn't feel as good as smooth anymore. So it does make a difference, and it's very important to keep your fin
within reason. Because I was in La Palma with Vincent Valkness, who is like probably the fastest man in the world. I think he's reached the top speed out of anyone in the world. His fin looked like there'd been a mouse nibbling at it. It's his practice fin. But I'm like, well, surely you won't be using that because it's dangerous. He's like, it's fine. And I was like, looking at this thing, obviously it's not smacked and it's splayed out or anything like that. It was still smooth, but it had chunks and stuff, literally chunks out of it.
In the front or the trailing edge?
In the like the top bit. Honestly, if you took a picture of it and you said, whose fin do you think this is? And you showed a picture of me, fastest guy in the world, all these people, you would be the last person that you would think would be like, yeah, it's fine. And he genuinely was like, yeah, it's all right, it's fine. Honestly, I was like, what? Because when I used to do the Olympic sailing and we're hanging out with all the sailors, oh my God, these guys, they are the most anal. They are wet and dry in, to whatever grip, their whole boat, every tiniest blemish. It's bonkers.
It's funny you should say that, because I went for a wave sailing trip a week ago with my friend and I had to fix a few nicks in my fins. And when I opened up the fin bag, there was some wet and dry paper in there. I thought, oh, why not? I might as well just do the bottom as well. I've got the time. Geez, it feels nice though. The bait, it just becomes so smooth. It must make a difference, surely.
Yeah, but they in the foiling, they got gloves, they've got all this apparatus in there. If someone goes near the foil with the finger like this, everyone's like, "Oh, you fuck!"
Oh,
That's it.
yeah. That's a bit
That's it. I
crazy.
gotta
Maybe a
clean it
bit
all
too
up.
much.
You know, it's crazy because any bit of grease on the foil or any bit of this can totally, you know, and that's the only thing that's in the water. So it's a big deal for the foilers. But you know, in terms of wave sailing, yes, okay, a big crack or a big squash on the front, yes,
like
but
that.
just a couple of nicks, I think, is not the end of the world. Depending on the fin, depending, yeah.
I mean, I feel like you do feel it. For example, that's why I had to fix it. I had to put like this bog.
Yeah, well, that's quite a big chunk, but you know, like the little nicks, again, just sand them out. It's very rare that's the big difference I found.
I've just put in the comments there for anyone who wants to repair a fin. I've actually made a fin repair video a year or two ago. So I've just put it there in the comments. Well, I filmed someone who actually who fixes boards and things. So it was quite interesting, you know, like the sort of nicks that Mark had there. You know, I had to put like sticky tape on one side and, you know, do all that. It was cool. So anyway, the link's there if anyone wants to fix their fin.
Well, a fin foil says just sand out the sharp edges and it'll be good enough.
And she'll be right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the she'll be right sort of program as well.
There's a comment here from Oh, sorry, Ben. I've just overridden your clicking.
No
Waggy Wagstaff says K4 have bought in a 70-30 fin. What does Mark think of that? And I'll be honest, I don't know what he's talking about.
That's asymmetric, so it's not flat one side.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's got 30%. 70. You know, so it's not a total flat asymmetrical.
It's like that. This is exactly like this. It's 70-30, I think.
Like like asymmetrical, but not extreme.
I see. So it's not, and that was because someone asked the question before. Sorry, I've now lost it. Somebody made a comment. So they're not totally flat. That flat section is not. No. Okay.
No, they're still a little bit. And for example, I mean, I don't know exactly how it works because, you know, Kai was the one that was doing it, but we did work on a fin with less toe in, and he said that when he was putting less toe in, he was going less asymmetric, you know, so it had more shape the less he was going. The theory behind it, I don't know exactly. I haven't thought about it before, but that's what he said. But it's still, this one is my favorite, which is more toe in.
Okay.
Vergod says you explained fins for use on sideshore, then onshore. How about if you sail side onshore like Cabezo, for example?
Then I would use these ones like my sideshore ones, 100%, which is the same I do in like Pozo. Even if I go Barcas, it's still onshore, you know. But by the way the wave is and stuff, I don't like my onshore fins there. I still go back to my sideshore fins.
You sideshore in terms of the Hookkeeper ones, the KSs?
No, actually, my side fins, my asymmetrical ones.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, there I mix it. I use the onshore area with the asymmetrical front.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So onshore you use your onshore fins, sideshore you use sideshore fins, and that side on you use a mixture of both. I mean, kind of interesting.
This is what I was using, like what I was doing the last year. You know, this is where I came out. It was like the best balance. You know, after spending all summer in the Canaries, it's where I like the most. You know.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, there we go. I think we'll try and cut it under 2 hours.
There's a €6 donation here.
Hey!
Oh, Ben, your beers are up for that.
Oh, winner. I'll go get you beers, coffee.
Coffee.
Actually, before we go, I just have one other question for you, Mark, because this is something that I do. When you I have two sets of fins for the conditions. Like, so for example, if it's down the line, I have a smaller set and a bigger set, because my thinking is the winds gets stronger, I use a smaller sail, and then if the waves gets better or whatever, I just go into a smaller fin. And if it's lighter wind and I need to get upwind because I'm floating riding and whatever, I put on a bigger set of fins. What would be the difference in size generally you'd go between the larger and the smaller? Are we talking just like a centimeter or
Less.
something? Less.
Zero,
Okay, just half.
yeah, 0.5 difference.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
Now that I have the option, I go 0.5. Before that, I didn't have the option, I would go 1 cm from like 15 to 14.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's generally a good rule of thumb, do you think, for the average sailor? Maybe if you're going to have the bare minimum with fins, I mean, you can have the bare minimum and have just one set, but if you want to experiment, you'd have, one for, I mean, essentially the smaller the sail, then you just put the smaller fins on and vice versa. I mean, kind of, yeah.
I mean, if you, like normally, I guess you would have one board for that lighter stuff, which then anyway translates to a bigger fin, and then a slightly smaller board, which translates to a smaller fin. But if you cannot have two boards and you only have one, and you feel, for example, that the board is starting to overpower you, then you can move down in size. And then you, for example, in the turns, I feel like you might be able to push a little less. Like you're gonna have to back down a little bit more, but you're gonna get this more progressive drift, as we were speaking about before.
Yeah, because actually that's it.
Go on, Karen.
Oh no, I was going to say, it just reminded me when you're talking, Mark, if you happen to go on a windsurf holiday or you're traveling with windsurf gear and you don't want to take two boards, then having a few extra fins to play around with is almost like, it's not the same as having, say, two size boards, but I found you get a lot more versatility with the board that you've got.
100%.
Isn't it? It's yeah.
So back then I used to have in 2018, for example, when I went to Chile, I had one simmer board, one that was an 85, and then for Matanzas I used to the thruster setup, which was the standard fin setup that I was using on that board. And then for Topocalma, I had a quad fin setup, and that was what I like in Topocalma. That was more offshore, and so it was easier, and it was slightly smaller, the rears of that quad. So it was easier for me to roll over the board, and get that a bit more easier and looser feel to it. Yeah.
What would be good? I'm just thinking when you're talking now, I'm just trying to think of the person who's like listening to this podcast and they're walking away and they want to do something. What would be cool is if the brands, like I'm thinking of Simmer, for example, now, is like on the page where the flywave is, and there's an 85 and the different sizes, there's almost like this fin section that sort of basically says, if you want to do this, these are the sizes we work. If you want to do this, and it doesn't have to be a Simmer branded fin. It can be MFC. It can be a K4. And because the good thing I would say was K4 is cheaper as well. So you can experiment more with a K4 fin because of the price point. When you're talking about paying for a G10 fin, which might be $400, $500 or whatever it could be, maybe $300. I don't know actually the prices, but they're quite expensive, maybe $300, $400. A K4 fin is a lot cheaper than that. So if you did want to experiment, again, I'm not sponsored by K4 or anything, but I just know the price point is a lot more sort of achievable, and you can kind of go, oh, maybe I'll try that. It's not going to break the bank if it doesn't really work. Whereas if you have to go out and buy a whole new fins and it doesn't work, it's kind of would grate a little bit. But it might be an idea for brands to start doing that, is, have maybe riders recommend fins that they specifically use that are not the stock standard fins, if for people who want to kind of experiment. Because what made me think is there's a guy here, SN says, I have a 78 Mamba, which I'm guessing is the Fanatic. I'm guessing, is it?
Yeah, Fanatic Mamba.
Mamba with a standard fins, and I'm thinking of changing the fronts from 7+ for 7+ Beaufort. So crosswind and powerless waves. Would you recommend 9s or 10s over the standard 11?
10s, 100%. I would go 10 cm. Yeah,
10.
especially on a 78. Yeah. Unless you like a super loose feel that you just push a little bit and the tail just pops out, then I would just go 10, because I feel like it's going to give you a good balance between planing power and looseness. So
That's actually interesting. Just having you on here. Imagine if we got if the brands like once a month did this like questions and answers, and maybe there's a fin thing, and people come on who have bought a Simmerboard, or let's say you're sponsored by Quattro, or let's say Brasilio is Goya, and people come on and say, I bought this board, I want to do this, and you go like Dr. Mark goes, right, I recommend you asymmetric front fins, 9.5s, and some back fins. It would be pretty cool if you could you obviously don't want it to last forever, but it would be a real useful thing where someone goes, this is my problem, what do you recommend, Dr. Mark?
Cool. Can we start with my board?
But it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's better to be brand specific, because then people, let's say me, I wouldn't have a clue about the Pyramid 90 or whatever it could be, but maybe the guys who are sponsored by Quattro would be like, I'm your weight, in these conditions I use this, it's definitely worth changing this. It's like I went on the VMAX yesterday for a blast, and I put probably a CN extra downhaul. I wouldn't be able to say that for a 0.7 sail or a whatever sail, but team riders could. So it could be a thing for brands to do, like some sort. I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah. I just want to clarify this comment from Beach Bum as well, who may have just joined in, but we were talking about the price of fins before, and when we were saying $300 I think we'd sort of generally come to the conclusion from most countries it was around somewhere between $200 to $300 for a set of quad fins, not for a single fin, but either a set of quad or a thruster setup. So they're not cheap, but you have to buy 3 or 4, I guess, and that's part of the expense of it.
Yeah.
And Nacho, good job, guys. You've motivated me to try asymmetric. Get your money out, mate.
What does the last part say in that, Mark?
Un abrazo means a hug, team.
What does it
mean?
Hug
to the team, to us. Sending us
cool. Yeah, well, I'll hopefully we'll probably motivate a few people to have a look at the fin setup they've got and see if it can be improved. But I definitely know from experience that playing around with your fin is probably the most underrated thing that you can tweak on your windsurf gear. It's surprising what difference it makes.
Your fellow Aussie mate says mast high, cross, off, down, and still relevant. It's true. It works. Like if you've got big lines,
single fin,
it can still be relevant for sure. Yeah. But the only thing I don't like is the top turn of the single fin. Personally, you get a lot of power and then it disappears. Like when you push past a certain point. Good for aerials. If you look at Josh Angulo and the way he sails Punta Preta sometimes on his single fin, if you've got the right board with the right curves, it can still do a good, solid job.
Those old Polacow videos, single fin.
Yeah, but you look when he comes out, you get loads of pressure, and then it does get that point where it goes. And I think there's definitely a lot of nostalgia with single fins, which have got moments and place, but you don't see many people still using them, and they could do. People have tried to say, they're going to come back. And every time I see someone try it, they never do.
But that comment from Michael Wester, I know him from Giroa days, and he loved to bust out the single fin when it got bigger. So he's a big fan of it.
Yeah, because it's solid. It doesn't do anything weird. Like I said, watch Josh Angulo in Punta Preta. And
they're fast. Nice and fast as well.
Especially top off. You're not having to do any crazy lines a lot of the time. Well, it depends how you want to ride, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably a topic you could talk about for days because it can get pretty technical, isn't it? Hopefully whoever's listening
Bruno doesn't even windsurf, and he says he's here. I can't think of a worse podcast to listen to.
Well, I don't know. How did he even find this podcast? Maybe he wants to. He wants to be a windsurfer. Good on you, Bruno.
Maybe not
Give
after
it a
this
go,
chat.
man. There's a bunch of geeks. That's awesome. That's so cool. Oh well, what do you reckon?
Anyway, Jan
Are we,
says, just before we go, Jan says yes. Also motivated to make an asymmetrical now. Very fun.
Nice. I'm happy, you know, and yeah, for me it's important. Not trying to sell anything to anyone, but
follow my website.
What's your website, Mark?
I hope I had a fin brand. You see that, then I could.
Yeah, shame you haven't got a sponsor.
But yeah, I feel like it's very important, you know, because I feel like it's helped me a lot. And even, you know,
sorry, I just had this vision of Facebook or Instagram opening next week, and it's like Pare fins, new asymmetric things. I'm like, the little bastard, he knew all along.
No, but even, you know, Victor, like he had like some of the first asymmetricals that Kai, I think, he made, and he never used them, you know, and I just kept using them, and then I kind of made newer versions of that with Kai. And then last summer I was like, yeah, just try my board. And then I was like, fuck, those fins feel so good, you know. And then I let him try my other ones, and then he loved it. So then he ordered like some sets, and now he's using asymmetrical fins too.
And now he's just smashed out 2/3 in the both World Cups.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, I feel like it's good at any level to try it, you know. And even my friend, I think he bought some after I told him, and he's loving them, you know. And he's a good sailor, but he's not like the best, you know.
Okay. Order me some fins, all right.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. Put in the comments now if you want some asymmetrical fins. We're taking orders after the show. No, I'm joking, but I'm genuinely interested who motivated for asymmetrical fins. Paul, are you motivated?
Definitely. Yeah, no, I need to experiment with my fins a lot more,
With your
because
fingers.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I talked to Jaeger briefly. When was it? I don't know when it was, but he said he was using asymmetric fins now as well, which is interesting. So there you go.
Very interesting. There we go. All right, boys.
Before we go, I've just been, let's have a look here. These are pretty bad, but I've just been looking at different logos here for your fin. They're all pretty boring. Oh, here we go. Pare fin, shred harder.
You know it's coming. He's set us up here, hasn't he? Oh, let's do a fin podcast. And then suddenly.
Oops, where are we? We've all gone. Anyway. Well done. All right. Well, why? Oh, that's right. I've got to stop that screen.
You're right there.
Why am I the main character of the screen at the moment? How do I change that? There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. I definitely learned something, and look forward to spending thousands of dollars on fins. Oh, what we got here, mate?
Who wants asymmetrical fins too?
That's a cute dog. What's the name of your dog?
The name of her? She's called Lua.
Yeah. Ah, cool. Keeps you company while you're injured.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, mate.
She's a good dog.
All right, boys. I'm going for a surf.
Lucky you.
I was going to say, you're going to go play with fins.
I actually need to sort the shed out, build a shed. Oh God, don't even get me started on what's going on over here at the moment.
Good luck, Benjamin.
All coming. All right, cheers for joining, Mark. Thanks again. That was educational, and we will, again, as I say it one more time, we will be trying to do a free ridey kind of slalom fin. So if anyone's keen for that, I know Fin Foil messaged. I will be in touch, or you can be in touch with me or Paul or whoever even runs this show. No one even knows anymore. And we'll try and get a few other people in as well. I think it would be interesting. So get your questions tuned in. All right, until the next one.
Bye.
the week again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress in the house, it's Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear, tips plus the world's best quiz. Carbs, PWA. We're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards to a windsurfing cat. It's your one-stop shop for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.